Committee. So we'll start the meeting. I'd like to place item number 1 on consent and begin the conversation and the meeting with item number 9, and to ask the city attorney and the CAO to walk us through this ordinance and the report.
What number are we on?
Number 9.
Actually, sir, the CAO rep who has worked on this is on his way over from City Hall East. He should be here just shortly. Can we hold off for?
Well, I'm holding off on 2 through 6 for Mr. Parks, who also has some questions. And
Is Thomas out there?
He was here a second ago.
Oh, okay.
He was just here.
Oh, there he is. We're good to go.
While he's getting ready, I need to announce the item. For item number 9, what you have before you is the city attorney report as well as the city administrative officer report and an ordinance. This has to do with an amendment of chapters 10 and 11 of Division 4 of the Administrative Code to provide a second tier with reduced and different benefits for new hires who become members of the Los Angeles City Employees Retirement System on or after January 1, 2012, and to make other technical corrections. This item has also been referred to Budget and Finance Committee.
thank you. If you could briefly walk us through this, that would be great.
Yes, definitely. Thomas Simonowski from the CAO. Basically, what you have before you is an ordinance for a new lasers tier that will be applicable to new hires as of January 1st, 2012. This is something that has sort of been in the works for the last, I'd say, year and a half. We've been getting constant feedback and direction from the EERC, and we have reached out to labor unions and provided them with the EERC approved plan design for a new tier. We've gone through that process, treated it as a sort of a consultation, not a meet and confer process. And we have tried to incorporate their suggestions. And this is all under the guidance from our city attorney. And so what you have here today is basically a new retirement tier that has that maintains a defined benefits plan, but does have less benefits than the current lasers tier. And the goal here was to achieve a level of cost savings for future city hires of Los Angeles for our civilian employees in lasers.
And who does this apply to? Does this apply to all bargaining units?
It would apply to any bargaining unit that has lasers members. So we're really talking mostly civilian employees that are on the city side. It excludes members of the Department of Water and Power retirement system and the Los Angeles Fire and Police Pensions system.
Any other questions on item number 9?
The unions have supported this, whether negotiations or meet and confer or talk and discuss or roundtable?
I would say that they do not support this. We've had repeated meetings to discuss what a new tier should look like. Unfortunately, we have not received their support. We've tried to incorporate some of their suggestions, and it's been, the guidance that we received from our city attorney that a new tier for new hires does not technically constitute meet and confer. And we've operated under those guiding principles.
And are they then going to file action against it, or do they have grounds to do that?
I don't know.
Because we changed the police and fire plan.
Correct.
Starting January 1st.
Starting July 1st,
July 1st.
Tier 6 will become effective.
Mm-hmm. And then this will then correspond with the civilian workforce. What about water and power? Has there been any attempt on that?
Well, we have no jurisdiction over the water and power retirement plan. The Department of Water and Power is the plan sponsor for that retirement
I know, but
plan.
we have police and fire have been changed. Civilians have been changed, and the whole city needs to somehow have some kind of parallel modification. I mean, if water and power is way out there and everybody else is way behind, we have a problem. Has there been any discussion with them on any
Well,
kind of modification?
There was a potential charter amendment back in October, I believe that was considered by council to look at potentially changing the plan sponsorship over to the city side, but I don't believe that measure was passed, and it didn't make it to the ballot.
I just think what happens is, once people get on, it gives more encouragement to go over to water and power, which we already have a problem with people get experience and they go to water and power, which then leaves those other departments short-staffed. And if the spread, and I don't know what the spread is now, but I'm sure it'll be much greater unless we make some other compromise to be fair across the board. It's supposed to be the city family. It seems that certain segments do more of a cut than others, and they haven't done any cut.
Would you like to send that back to EERC to perhaps get
I'd like
some-
to see if they're gonna do anything. I mean, it just, I know the police and fire have done it. As you said, July 1st takes effect. This is for all city employees, excluding, and then we have 3 pension plans. Police and fire is 1, the LACER 2, and the water and power 3. It just seems that there should be something, a discussion or some kind of movement other than just nothing.
At this point, I'm not aware of any plan design changes for DWP's retirement system. I know that there is a matter regarding the reciprocal arrangement between DWP and LACERS, and that's the only item that I'm aware of that is currently in play.
I just think if we're gonna do it for one group, it should be done in a fairness for all the employees. Because it definitely goes from 2.16 to 1.16, which is a huge hit, and then 2% based on the age. I mean, this is significant, 100% to 75, et cetera, the different categories.
I think we're going beyond the scope of this particular agenda item, and some of the issues that you're raising aren't really in the jurisdiction of this committee.
Well, they're
This has been vetted, though, through EERC.
This, I understand, but I'm trying to figure out if we're only gonna do this in police and fire and nothing else is gonna be done, which then creates the dilemma that we already have.
But police and fire isn't on the agenda.
No, I know it's not. And I'm saying we've done those have been done.
Well, I'm assuming we take those
I just
step
look-
by step, but I agree we want to eventually do it. I don't know that that would
There's gotta be some.
hold up this item.
No, I don't wanna hold it up, but there's gotta be some fairness somewhere along the way. I just think it's gotta be fair when you're talking about a pension, and while I don't think this is it's a pension versus a 401, I just think there should be some, say, equality with the different representative bodies.
But these are new hires, so that's speculative, the equality.
Well, it's the same thing with police and fire. They're new hires too. I'm not talking
Well,
about
they're not
changing.
here yet, though.
Something that's already there. Well, that's July 1st. At least it's been approved for that, right?
Tier
This one-
6, yes,
And this will take effect January?
January
2012.
1st of 2012.
Okay.
Now, with police and fire, we were able to at least not get their support, but at least not their active opposition. So there was a certain amount of negotiation. Why were we not successful in achieving that level of agreement with the LACERS employees?
Well, what you say is true. We were able to get a non-opposition with firefighters and police officers. I think with the civilian units that represent LACERS members, there's a larger number of units, so there's perhaps more differences of opinions within the units, there's probably other items as well that I probably would not be appropriate for me to comment on, since it would be more appropriate for EERC to discuss.
Any other questions, comments, Mr. Parks?
Let me just ask one question. The term I'm not familiar with, about the fourth one down, deferred vested retirement.
Yeah.
What is that?
Those are basically members that end up leaving city service, and they leave their employee contributions within
What do you call it
LACERS. once they become eligible to retire, then they can go ahead and earn their service retirement allowance.
So they draw it down at their age of retirement?
If they choose to do so, yes. Yeah. They can choose to wait, but basically they've left city service, and when they choose to retire from Lacers, as long as they haven't withdrawn their contributions, if they meet the requirement eligibility to retire, then they can go ahead and start receiving their benefit.
These are people who, Mary Jo Kerwin, Deputy City Attorney, these are people who leave the city when they're not eligible to retire, but they
wait.
leave their years there. Sometimes they come back and retire directly, but if they don't, they can take this retirement when they reach the right age.
Thank you. The one thing I think, from my perspective on this pension, why they've probably been less cooperation is the fact that there's a couple of items I think that the civilian unions strongly disagree with, and it's probably the normal retirement age is one, because at one time we were talking about 62, 63, and then the other one was, I think, in listening to some of the members, they basically at one time were waiting to see what the police were going to do, and they thought it was much more modest than what they've been asked to do, and so that's been kind of their stumbling block, as opposed to they have any right to anoint this or not is not the question. The issue is they just feel as though theirs is a significant higher ask than the police. That's what we've been told.
Yeah.
And then, Dennis, you may, I don't want to get on an item that's outside of the agenda, but just wanted to remind Dennis that we did have an opportunity to do something with the Ward Power, and the president of the union showed up at the podium and met and conferred, and 14 council members said, let's not do anything. So I just wanted to remind you of that.
Well, that was then, now is now.
Right, as long as we're all discussing an item that's not really on the agenda or
Just thought I'd
appropriate.
bring that up.
My perception of that was it seemed rushed at the time, and I suspect if it's revisited, it might be a more plausible issue.
Well, it was only 3 years, I think, so.
Okay, so,
So is there a motion to move the ordinance?
Could I just make one comment here that when I drafted this, it was before there are two current ordinances, one adopted yesterday and one that's before the council that deal with the health subsidy rights of existing employees. And as part of Tier 2, I had to put in the health provisions. I had to put in the health provisions for the current people who become Tier 1 and the people who are Tier 2. So we will have to make some technical changes in light of those two ordinances to these existing provisions before it goes to council.
Okay, and actually, I would make one other point, which is the level of opposition could be expressed by the fact that there are no employee organizations here physically fighting it and testifying against it in committee. So I think
So-
that would at least be a somewhat positive indication.
Mr. Chair, so for the record, what you're approving today in the ordinance that you have provided is a concept that is going to be modified to address the technical corrections that you're making, and you're approving what she's presenting.
It wouldn't really change the provisions that relate to Tier 2, but within that, there are the Tier 1 benefits, the original ones, those have to be modified to in line with whatever happens with these. Well, one's already been adopted, so I can change for that. The other one is before the council, so depending upon what happens there, before this goes to council, I think it's fine to go to committee because we're not talking about changing the Tier 2 provisions, just the ancillary provisions that are also included.
Okay, so you'll provide me with the final ordinance prior to scheduling for council
Council.
consideration.
And I believe this is going to be referred to Budget and Finance Committee next, so
It
you
is.
might also be able to
Right.
do it in time for that committee.
Well, we have to wait and see what happens. I understand that there's a freeze on health subsidy benefit ordinances before the council. In order to, because I have some of the same provisions in here, you don't want to have one inadvertently canceling out the other. They have to be coordinated.
I thought that item was coming Friday on the health benefits.
I believe it's coming back to the council again.
Yes, it's scheduled on this Friday's agenda.
And that's the second reading?
Second reading for the Lacers medical subsidy freeze.
Okay, so do we have a motion on the item?
Make a motion.
Okay, moved by Mr. Zine. Without objection, that
And
passes
we'll
unanimously.
waive this out of budget and finance. We can get it to council.
So it's waived out of budget and finance? Okay.
So basically, we just need to coordinate. Once you give me the final ordinance, we can schedule it for council
Right.
consideration.
And we just need to know, if there's going to be any other changes to the provisions before we finalize this. Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'd suggest that we hear items 2 through 6 together. These are DWP issues relating to healthcare benefits.
Good afternoon,
Hello.
council members. I'm Caroline McKnight, and I'm the Manager of Employee Health and Benefits for DWP, and I'm here to speak on these issues. And I have with me my Assistant Manager, George Fogelson, on the end, and Mr. Rob Lacayo, who is from Mercer, our third-party healthcare consultant, just in case there's some things that they can contribute. What I'd like to do is just do a brief presentation on these items and then address any questions you have about them. Is that okay? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, all of these items are for our health and dental benefits for our employees for an effective date of July 1, 2011. And I wanted to talk about what we've done as a result of being here last year and being at the council last year, and in particular, Councilmember Park's instructions to LADWP for us to competitively bid our contracts and to address Mr. Zine, Councilmember Zine's concerns last year over not all of our active employees having a PPO plan. So that was discussed last year when we were here. And what we did as a result of that is we solicited proposals from 4 carriers to consolidate our non-Kaiser business. And we reached out to Pacific Care, Aetna, Cigna, and Blue Shield to try to consolidate the Pacific Care, Blue Shield, and Health Plan of Nevada business. The Aetna and Cigna carriers declined to bid on the RFP, and we only received bids from Blue Shield and Pacific Care. And I wanted to explain a little bit about why we did not bid anything beyond that. We did not competitively bid Kaiser because Kaiser is a completely different delivery system than the other HMOs. They have their own doctors and their own hospitals. And if any of our employees or retirees were moved from Kaiser to another HMO, there would be 100% disruption for them. They wouldn't have any of their doctors or any of their hospital facilities in an alternative or a competitor's plan. And we do have 3,933 active in Kaiser and 3,846 retired Kaiser members. And one last thing on the Kaiser piece, our subsidies for all of our health plans are tied to the Kaiser rate. So it's kind of our benchmark for every other plan when we're determining the subsidy that we tie to all the other plans is the basis of it is from Kaiser. We did not competitively bid our IBEW Local 18's Anthem Blue Cross and Guardian Dental plans because they administer their own plans.
What item is that?
Pardon me?
What item?
It's not an item. I'm just explaining what we did bid and didn't bid. IBEW administers their own health and dental plans by an authority given to them in 1996, a letter of agreement that they have to administer their own plans. So we were unable to bid what they administer. And then lastly, I know there's a lot here about what we didn't do, but we did not bid our dental plans this year. We were focused on the health plan specifically and the savings we could realize there. Not bidding the dental plans was an oversight on our part, and with all due respect, I came away, I was here last year at this committee with other members of, DWP, and it wasn't clear to me, I will say that we were to look at dental. We should have. It was an oversight, and we're committed to looking at dental in the coming year to bid our dental plans to try to realize cost savings on the dental. So again, my apologies for that. Given all of that, the result of our competitive selection process was that we are consolidating the Blue Shield plan into the Pacific Care United Healthcare plan. United Healthcare is the parent company of Pacific Care, so their names are used interchangeably, but United Healthcare is the parent company. And we will realize a savings of $8.4 million of premium by consolidating into the plan. I'll go back a little bit to talk about the health plan of Nevada. We did, through the RFP process, ask the 4 carriers that we bid this to also bid on the health plan of Nevada piece. They did. The 2 carriers that responded, Blue Shield and Pacific Care, did provide a response to the health plan of Nevada business. But when Mercer, our consultant, helped us to look at the consolidated savings versus continuing with the renewal contract with Health Plan of Nevada, it was more cost-effective for us to have an individual contract with Health Plan of Nevada for next year as opposed to folding it into the consolidated plan with United Healthcare. So they were left on their own with their own renewal contract because it's the way that it was bid, and it was more cost-effective for us to continue with the renewal with them. Our total costs for our health and dental plans for 2011-12 are $201 million to LADWP, and this represents an increase of 3.9% over 2010-11. I wanted to talk a little bit more about a few other things, and then I'll take your questions. The consolidation also allows us to offer a new PPO plan to all active employees, which was not available to them in recent years. Only certain employees had access to a PPO, and through United Healthcare and what we're offering as of July 1, every active employee will have access to a PPO plan. We're also moving forward with our efforts under the Early Retiree Reinsurance Program, which is the ERRP, and I know the city is doing that as well on their side, to obtain reimbursement from the federal government for early retirees and their use of the healthcare system. We have filed our application in the fall. We're in the process of aggregating our data. We're working with Mercer and our carriers to submit our filing for reimbursement in the month of June. And for Mercer, it's taking about 30 days for the federal government to start issuing reimbursements once you submit your data. So we're looking at up to $5 million in reimbursements that we're likely to receive out of the ERRP. It's not an exact figure, but that's our best estimate at this point until we actually submit and get the reimbursements back. A couple of comments on what we do have in our plans. We do have co-pays in all of our LADWP-sponsored plans in the areas of prescription drugs, hospital services, physical therapy, mental health, maternity, chiropractic, alcohol and substance abuse, vision care, and emergency and urgent care. As far as employee contributions, employees are required to make a contribution in the amount of $85.40 monthly if they're enrolled in the family tier of the Pacific Care / United Healthcare HMO plan. And on the IBEW-sponsored Anthem Blue Cross plan, they have a required monthly contribution if they're in the Employee Plus One tier, and that is $203.23 monthly. And if they're in the family tier, it's $560.16 monthly. One last thing on wellness, and then I'll be ready for your questions. Our wellness efforts that we try to do through the year, we partner with our health plan carriers to come in and work with us on certain programs, and we do things like smoking cessation, CPR, stress management, food safety, Walk Across America program to combat obesity. So our carriers help us to identify where our high utilization is and what types of diseases our employees and their families may have, and they help us to target programs to try to address that through our wellness efforts. So that is the summary of my presentation that I have for you, and if you have questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, for starters, it seems like a lot of information, somewhat confusing, all of which should have been part of your reports. How come all this stuff wasn't in there about who bid, who didn't bid, which ones you should have bid and inadvertently didn't? All that information I would have expected to be in these reports.
Are you talking about the reports going to our board for the approval of our contracts that then are forwarded over to you?
Well, the reports before us don't include a lot of the information you just gave us, which I would have expected.
Okay, I apologize for that not being in there, and we'll make a note of that going forward.
I mean, it gives us a completely different perspective of what actually went on. Still not clear, even in some of your MOUs, like the one on item 2, it reads, These agreements are exempted from the competitive bidding process because existing labor agreements specifically list the plan provider as a healthcare option for LADWP employees, and therefore a competitive bidding process is not practical or advantageous. Nonetheless, we did a competitive process anyway, even though it wasn't practical or advantageous, and we saved millions of dollars. So obviously there's a conflict there between not being practical and advantageous and the fact that in reality it was practical and advantageous. So why do we have that language in there? And on some of the others, why did we bid on some, not bid on some?
On the competitive bidding and the MOU language, we did a competitive bid for it within our existing carriers to consolidate carriers. So the business that we were competitively bidding was within those named in our MOUs to try to consolidate them together and give the successful bidder more leverage in the marketplace to realize those cost savings. So we were competitively bidding, which are named carriers, Pacific Care, Blue Shield, and Health Plan of Nevada. So we were competitively bidding within those named in our MOUs.
And even that wasn't clear until I just asked that question. So you competitively bid, but only among a small number of carriers.
We bid within our existing carriers. Mercer did help us to put it out in the marketplace beyond that with Aetna and Cigna. Cigna is a named carrier in our MOUs, although they opted out of our business and stepped away some years ago. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to confuse on the Cigna issue, but that's what we did. We competitively bid with our named carriers to try to consolidate plans.
And since it does seem practical and advantageous and we seem to save money when we competitively bid, why did we not go out for dental? Even if you didn't understand that we directed you to, why would you need that direction when it's obvious it saves money and it's cost effective?
It is obvious. We should have done it. We're committed to doing it this year, and it makes sense to do it. We see the savings on the health side. I have talked with Mercer about it while we've been waiting here, and we do feel, and Mercer has agreed, that the dental savings may not be as great as the healthcare savings, but we still could realize some savings on that side, and it behooves us to do it, so we will.
And as far as bidding out Kaiser, what if Kaiser gave us a 50% rate increase? Would we still say no matter what they give us, we would just stick with Kaiser because it's impractical to change?
Mercer may be able to help me answer this a little bit further. I believe Kaiser acts as the other carriers do, and they look at the utilization rate by the members in the plan to help determine any increases or decreases that they come back with for a subsequent plan year. And Mercer negotiates with them directly on our behalf. So perhaps Mercer could comment a little bit further about what to anticipate from Kaiser in the future.
Well, I'm not objecting to Kaiser or their rates or their service. I've been a member since I was born, but
Me too.
And I still am. But
Me too.
And I'm still here and doing fine. But the question is, why do we exempt them? Even though obviously practically it would be difficult to change, it still would make sense to go out to bid and see what else is out there to keep them as competitive as possible.
Rob, do you have any thoughts on that from the industry perspective with Kaiser?
From an industry perspective, it's difficult when you have a population, and this is among all groups, and one of the most common programs, benefit programs, is something that includes Kaiser. And I'm going to speculate that that's probably, 80%, something very high percentage of groups that would include Kaiser. It's very difficult to remove Kaiser. Some of the discussions that were had around this were, aside from the MOU issues and the bargaining unit issues, were around the disruption, and that was a big concern, because now we're talking about 100% disruption. Everyone in those plans will have to change facilities, labs, specialists, primary care physicians. Everything will need to change, and that's what, when Caroline mentioned the nature of their delivery model, that's specifically around that. So when we were talking about all everything combined, including the MOUs, the direction was to go ahead and exclude them.
Any other places competitively bid against them, just to sort of keep them honest rate-wise and all that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Are you aware of other cities in the same circumstance that still might competitively bid against Kaiser to be
you know,
sure they keep their rates reasonable, et cetera?
I have to say that I'm not, given the book of business that I work with, and then also with conversations with colleagues, and we do talk about Kaiser frequently, it's very uncommon that people look to remove Kaiser, and a lot of times they are still the most cost-effective HMO for that population. It's very difficult, and it typically doesn't happen.
Other questions, Mr. Parks?
Yeah. Let me just ask, part of our discussion last year was asking you to get with the Personnel Department and to also come back and report back to us. Did any of that ever occur?
I believe we reported back in the late summer that we were going to competitively bid our plans. And I think that was around September.
Was that an impression that all of them, or
Pardon me?
was the report back that all of them was going to be competitively bid?
I don't believe it was reported at that point because we didn't have that defined yet with Mercer, our consultant, about who would be receiving the bids and which pieces of it were being bid.
Okay.
We did work with Mercer to bid what we felt we could.
Let me just give you my impression. When we sat here a year ago, I knew we'd be back here a year later, and we'd hear about the same presentation you just made, and you would not have complied with most of the things we asked, because I don't think the department had an intention to comply. And I think that if you, in fact, what was interesting at the last meeting, I think we asked two questions that caused me a concern. One was how much of the package cost the DWP, and no one knew what the entire package was for the 5 plans. And we said, what was the rate of increase over the last 10 years? And no one knew. When we got to council, we found that the 10-year cycle was 157%. And so we sit here today looking at Kaiser with another 10%, and we say it's too disruptive. I'm just wondering how disruptive it would be if we keep going down that path and we get to 200%, 250. How much more at 10% per year do we go for without saying we have to do it another way? And the other issue is, I don't think, because I know in the city they give you several options. I don't think we're saying displace Kaiser, but you give people another option. And just, I think the city's been successful at providing people Blue Cross, Kaiser, and a variety of plans that you can actually, once a year, sign up for.
Yes.
And as you go through life, you find people find different needs, and often when their kids get older, Kaiser may not be what fits them. They want an option to go to Blue Cross. But if we don't provide it, we just keep going down a path, paying 10% unfettered, undiscussed. Here's your franchise. We have no hope of ever coming back with any way to reduce the cost. And I think that, when you said that as much discussion as we had in this committee and then at council, to say that it was confusion about whether the dental was part of it. Dental was on the agenda. We didn't separate it. We didn't say, accept this. We said, look at all of these plans. In fact, our city attorney clarified, because I think someone from your group said, we can't do this issue of competitive because it's embedded in the contract. And she stood up and said, no, it's embedded, but on the other hand, it doesn't say you can't make them compete. And so we said, well, that's what we want. We want you to make them compete. We talked at great length about the issues of what successes Personnel Department had. We said we'd like you to meet with them and find out how they've intertwined wellness, what they have done to kind of keep the rates down. And although, it's not a world beater, they're running at about 110% over 10 years. You guys are running, at least until this next year, at about 157. So at some point, I would hope that we'd realize that the piggy bank is going to break. And then if you add on to that, that about 40% of your payroll is paying for pension, and we know what's coming is a rate increase because of what? Because of our personnel costs, not because we want to do, we always label it as let's do something for renewables, let's do infrastructure. But just by coincidence, we raise it and we pay our personnel costs. And so these are things that, again, I just figured that in somewhere I tried to give it a little bit of guidance because I picked up the phone and called and said, are you guys on the right path?
Right.
Are you moving forward? Did you include the city people? Did you get
Right.
Our city attorney involved that basically as part of negotiating contracts so we make sure there's no backslide? And none of that happened. And then we come in today and say, well, we just kind of oversighted on the dental. We just made a decision that Kaiser didn't fit. We did do this one thing and saved $8 million. And then when your general manager came to budget, we asked him, and his first thing he wanted us to know was, we saved $8 million. And we said, great, what did you do with the rest of it? And he says, oh, I didn't know we're supposed to do any more. And we said, well, your staff did. I mean, so that's what's kind of, to me, deflating in the sense of that we're here a year later. We made a tiny bit of progress. We're still going down the same path. And we've done nothing to change the impression. The DWP does whatever it wants, and they'll give you a rationale, and later say, next year we'll do better. And you say, well, we gave you a year to do better. And we get the same stuff back. And again, I realize it's not in the general fund, but again, you're going to ask us to raise rates because of all the other things. And we're saying, how could you show us you're saving money on things you have an impact on? And you didn't even maximize that.
Well, we are, at least in the health plans arena, I know you're talking about DWP's potential rate increases. We have identified the $8.4 million is a savings we have realized through the consolidation. That's done, and that
We'd
we
like
have
to see
that.
that on all 5 plans.
We have that, and then we're hopeful on the ERRP reimbursement that we'll have up to $5 million coming back to us from the federal government that we can apply specifically to our health plans.
Okay.
So we're really, within the health plans arena, trying to manage our own and manage our own funds here, not tied to the rate
What would we have
increase.
done if you'd have just done a little more than what we asked you to do?
We'd be a little more in that direction. I see your point, and we will go back and do that.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is that you put us in a bind because you say July 1st, these things have to go through. And I think we mentioned it last time, you bring us stuff at the last minute, we get 30 days. If you don't do it in 30 days, we'll all die, so let's get moving. And you say, well, how long have you had this stuff, and why didn't we get that meeting at mid-year so we could have said, hey, we don't like the idea of Kaiser being left out. We'd like you to have an option. We don't like the idea that you were confused about dental. We want that to be included. All that could have been resolved 6 months ago. That's why that committee report said, come back and see us in 6 months or something. So but when you don't do what we asked you to do, and then we come back and said, okay, give me 3 votes and 10 votes and let's move forward, because we just kind of messed it up this time and we'll do better next time. I don't know quite how we deal with that. I mean, in the sense is that my first reaction in the sense of looking at this is to say, well, on United Healthcare, okay, you did what we asked, that should be approved. The rest of it, in my judgment, appears that it should be go to month and fix it. And because that's what we asked you to do, is to fix it, to save a ton of money for the ratepayers and the city by looking at your health care differently than what you've been looking at it. And the only one that you did that on is 1 out of 4 or 5 is number 2. And it was substantial. And it would seem like when those numbers came in, you'd say, hey, I think we found something here. We need to do this across the board. Now, the one thing I didn't quite understand, even with the savings on number 2, is why we have a 7% increase on active and a 25% decrease on retirees. I didn't understand why there was such a disparity. But even with that, we're talking $8 million less ratepayer money going out for medical on this plan. But yet we have 4 others that we just kind of slid through the system and said, let's just bring them back. And I don't know if you didn't think we were going to read them, but
Oh, no. Just a comment on the retiree reduction. The Blue Shield plan that was consolidated was largely retirees in that plan. The majority was retirees. So the reduction that you're seeing is the Blue Shield plan being consolidated into United Healthcare and the large retiree population there.
And like, I think the other side, like Mr. Corrett said, it would have been far better to have some explanation about this, even though we may not agree with it, but to kind of have to pick through this and go back and find last year's committee reports and read what we asked you to do. And although the reports didn't use the word bid and things of that nature, your report back clearly reflects you do what we asked you to do. But even the stuff that's in the report, we didn't get any response to. I mean, I would have thought somewhere the light would have gone on and said, they've asked us very specifically, and maybe people thought we weren't going to be here, be another group that came through or whatever. But we'd expect that you would have come back and said, at mid-year, we can't perform what you asked. And then we could say why and whatever. And then today we'd have one of those very pleasant meetings and say, on consent.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's, I just don't understand how we got here.
My name is George Fogelson. I just wanted to mention 2 things you asked questions about. One is, I don't know if you were alluding to this, but if you do have Kaiser, you do have a choice of another HMO with DWP. You're not, I have Kaiser. Every open enrollment, if I so choose, I can change to another plan, and some employees, depending on which MOU they're in, they can switch to they have a choice of 3 plans.
But do they compete with Kaiser on costing? Or does Kaiser just have a franchise?
Well, I don't see Kaiser as having a franchise. I think personally, because I do have Kaiser, I understand the system. I've been in it for so long. I have a doctor that I have a relationship with, and most of my peers who have Kaiser, as you probably know, you develop relationships over the years, your children develop relationships. And if you were told that you had to go to a different plan, it would be a completely foreign thing. Of course, I'm grateful for any kind of health plan that I can have, but one reason we have Mercer as our consultant is to make sure that if they would raise it by 50%, I don't think that has ever happened. And I think that Mercer one of their roles is to negotiate with them to make sure what they're offering us and the benefits they're offering us are on par with the rest of the city, with the city of LA, and also with the county and with the country as a whole.
So let me just comment on a couple of things you said.
Okay.
The fact that you are a member might put you in a conflict as it relates to you looking at this independently. The other issue is that when you say disruption, there's a lot of disruption in life, particularly if we don't have money. And again, the fact of convenience, how much did we pay for that convenience? And you say, well, if it's 50% increase, how long do you have to go back? Is it 5 years that they've taken to get 50% increase? Because collectively, it's been 157 in 10 years. So incrementally, they have raised the price, or everyone has raised the price because they have had no competition. So I think the issue of saying, no, we've not had a 50% in 1 year, but we had 157 in 10 years. So we can figure out what that is per year, and we felt comfortable with it because we're paying that dollar amount for lack of disruption. And I don't know whether disruption is worthy of that price tag. And I think that's what I'm concerned about is that, yeah, it's comfortable, but who pays for that comfort? And should the city be paying this kind of cost for that level of comfort when there are other options and whether there are dollars that could be spent elsewhere? And so that's the kind of concern, and I can understand if you're with Kaiser and you like it, you probably are not going to be very objective about going somewhere else. But that may not be the best place to be when you're looking at saving dollars for the DWP and eventually the ratepayers.
Thank you. One other point I wanted to make is about the wellness, is I'm the wellness chair at the department, and I have done quite a bit since last year. I've surveyed what wellness programs are doing in the city of LA. I've talked to people at the county. I've talked to lacers. I've looked at what your personnel department offers, and then I've met with the different health plans to see what they can offer us at no cost to the department. One of the things that I'm interested in doing is each of the plans can do a health plan assessment at no cost to the employees. They can do that online, and then they can get health education materials emailed to them and sent to them. So there are things that we are very interested in doing to keep our workforce healthy and well.
I would hope so, and I think what they tell us is that the reason some of our costs are up is that we have an unhealthy workforce.
Correct.
And so therefore, wellness should probably be on the top of it, but the plans should be doing a good deal of that, as opposed to you having to do it all. That's the whole purpose of asking them for responding to EIRs, not EIRs, but RFPs, so that they can tell us what they can do for us. I mean, that's part of getting our contract, is giving us service that we're not used to getting, or getting a higher quality of service. So, I mean, that is exactly why we asked you to go and do that research. Not for you to have more to do, but what is the plans going to do for 9,000 employees?
Yeah, I've talked to each of the plans to find out what they can do for us, and we try to utilize all of their resources.
And what I would have hoped is after a year, we would have gotten a response on the RFP, and you'd be telling us the 12 things they're going to do for us because they got our business. We would be well beyond finding out what they do or what other people do. I mean, that's kind of like a field trip. I mean, the issue is we were looking that within a year, employees could be benefiting for that because we've already been told that our costs are up because our employees are unhealthy. And the other thing we've been told is that 20% of our employees use 80% of the service. So it tells us that they wait until they're really sick, and then it's really expensive. And then 80% of the people with a plan aren't using it, so it's education on that part too. So that's all the things we thought would be presented today and say, look what we found in behalf of 9,000 employees. Okay. Let me ask you, what's the options? I mean, because I've frustrated myself, but what are the options in the sense of today?
Well, our employees have, through their MOUs, a health and dental benefit that, as far as the coverage. Right now, their existing coverage takes them through June 30th. What we've done through these contracts is to try to have new coverages in place through these carriers as of July 1. So our effort is to move forward with these contracts so that they don't have a disruption in coverage. It becomes a labor issue and a bargaining issue if they don't have their health and dental benefits as of July 1.
Let me ask you this, is it more costly to go month to month as you're going through another process, or does the price stay about the same, or what?
We have not spoken to the carriers about a month-to-month agreement. My concern is that we have gone through our open enrollment process and presented information to the employees that says, if you opt for this plan, you will have this amount of a subsidy, or you will have this amount of a contribution, depending on a choice that you make for July 1. They've gone through open enrollment, which ended May 20th, and made those elections for an effective date of July 1. So if we go back to our carriers and go on a month-to-month contract, their rates could change, which would then require us to notify the employees of a possible change in their monthly contribution.
Okay.
And
what are the labor relation issues that are mentioned in all the reports?
what are the labor relations issues? Yeah. The labor relations issues are that we have in our MOUs named carriers that we will offer benefits to our employees through the named carriers on health and dental. We have language in there that says we will subsidize health benefits up to the Kaiser family rate, and we'll subsidize dental benefits tied to the Delta dental rate. So there's subsidy amounts that are in the MOUs, and there are named carriers that are in the MOUs.
Are there sufficient named carriers to create competition?
That's what we just did with the process. So we utilized the named carriers that were there, and we tried to realize the cost savings by consolidating the plans and giving one carrier more of the business so that they could leverage and give us better rates, which is what the result we have. But I do want to comment also that Mercer did, in their RFP process, send the RFP to a non-named carrier, which is Aetna, if I'm correct, Mercer. Aetna was a non-named carrier that we also sought business from them, and we would have had a labor issue if they had been the successful proposer in the RFP to then go back to the labor side and say, here we have a cost savings with Aetna. You know, will you agree to offer the Aetna plan? Here's what your employees will benefit from, and here's what the department will benefit from.
But is it sacred that those embedded plans remain?
No, our labor relations group, I'm not from labor relations, but I've been in contact with our labor relations manager, and there is an effort and discussions going on with the labor organizations to move towards more generic language that says LADWP will offer to the employees an HMO, a PPO, a dental, a DHMO for dental, a PPO on the dental side, without the named carriers being there. They're moving in that direction to do that through the negotiation process.
3 years or 4 years down the road when contracts are open?
The contract, we have at least one contract expiring in 2012, and our main contract that covers the majority of our employees expires in 2014. But I know the discussions are already underway for our labor relations manager with the bargaining units.
But that can't be changed until those expirations?
We do have our city attorney here that helps on our employee relations side with these contracts and with our personnel matters, and she may be able to comment on that further. This is Wendy Gens from the city attorney's office.
Good afternoon. Yeah, the Labor Relations Department is opening up negotiations with the union to see if the contracts could not be amended midterm. Right now, there is nothing to indicate that that will take place, but that is one of the proposals to try and get that aspect of the MOUs moving forward earlier than when the contracts are currently due to expire.
So that's an effort's moving forward. We have no
It is
definitive-
moving forward because we do have one of the unions whose contracts do come up next year. And so what we are trying to do is get all of the unions on the same plane so that if we can get one, we can get them all to follow suit, and we don't have the situation where we have one that may agree to it, another that doesn't, et cetera. So they're doing it on an across-the-board effort with all of the unions so that we have them all on board with the change.
Then let me ask, what is the hardship on if 3 and 4 on the dental, if I think that's the 2 dental plans, if they would be sent back for RFP, or do we have any idea?
It's the same situation for both health and dental. We don't have any commitment from any of the carriers on an amount on a monthly basis, and the dental carriers are also named in the MOU.
And these are the only 2?
These are the only 2. It's United Concordia and Delta Dental for our LADWP-sponsored plans.
Well, I would like, because I think July 1st is almost here, but I'd like to see that by the time you come to council, maybe you have some of these answers about month to month and things of that nature. And I just think that we, in my judgment, have wasted a year when we could have made a major, major impact on cost.
Could I just clarify so that I don't miss anything? When you're talking about the month-to-month,
If we held up the 2 dentals?
For dental, you want a month-to-month rate on the 2 dental?
Yeah,
Is it
you-
also all of the health carriers or just the dental on the month-to-month rate?
The thing is, I looked at number 3 and 4, that are both dental.
Yes.
It appears that they're separate and apart. So I'm just asking, could you find out if you were going to go out to RFP, what would be the cost if you went to month
Sure.
in that interim? The other issue on the medical, in looking at what success you had in bringing everybody together under United Health Care, that what would, and I understand the Nevada plan, nobody was really interested, so you're pretty
Well, they did bid, and Mercer can comment on this further if you like. They did bid. Blue Shield and Pacific Care were the 2 carriers that responded to the RFP. They did include a proposal to cover the health plan of Nevada business, but when Mercer looked at it on our behalf, it was more cost-effective to directly contract with Health Plan of Nevada as opposed to consolidating it either under United Healthcare or Blue Shield.
Yeah,
So
maybe
they were the direct They have that business in that area, and they came back with their own rates, which were better than the consolidated rates.
Ms. Brooks, it wasn't that they didn't bid, it's that the
Correct.
current bid was better.
The renewal with Health Plan of Nevada directly was more cost-effective than trying to incorporate and consolidate it with United Healthcare.
Okay. And then
Is that
would,
correct, Bob?
Right, so the option to retain HPN with a direct contract rather than fold them into either Blue Shield or UHC/Pacific Care, that was the most frugal option.
okay. Then let me ask, would you have done the same operation as you did on number 3 and looking at the United, no,
United Concordia and Delta Dental?
I'm sorry, number 2, United Healthcare Providers on number 2, would that have been the same plan if we had diminished disruption and just looked at cost effectiveness as to looking at number 6? Would you pull all
I'm
those-
confused by that. Do you mind repeating it? Because it's not clear to me.
Would you have used the same plan as number 2 on the United Healthcare, where you moved a number of providers into one RFP? Would you have done the same operation on number 6 with Kaiser if we were looking at it from the point of cost savings versus disruption?
Are you
they
saying,
be
would
the
we have
same-
taken the Kaiser business and put it out into the marketplace?
Would you
Or
use that same grouping? That's on number
Mercer,
2.
can you comment on that? Because they know the industry.
I'm afraid I may
Just
not
wondering.
totally understand the
Let me
question.
go
but-
over it again. I'll slow it down.
Okay.
On United Healthcare that you dealt with on item 2, that you saved $8 million.
Right, so let me just clarify real quick then. So the United, where that savings comes from is basically a transfer of risk from what is currently the retiree and a small segment of active population from Blue Shield, from that paper, over to the United Healthcare and Pacific Care.
Okay. But I'm saying, but you pull together, if I understand, several
Right.
care providers that basically bid on this level of
That-
service.
Yeah, so they were basically given the option to quote on what it currently is, Blue Shield, Pacific Care, and Health Plan of Nevada. And to your point, not Kaiser. Would there be potential savings? Probably not to that magnitude as a percentage basis, but the option is there.
Okay, but I just wanted to find out, would this grouping of Blue Shield, Pacific Care, would they be the same grouping that you would actually look at if you were looking at the Kaiser plan for a competitive bid?
To send the RFP to?
Yeah, that's in the RFP. Would this be the same grouping as listed in item 2?
Oh, right. So yes, absolutely. So we would go to the same folks. If we were going to put up that population, we would offer it to Shield, to Kaiser. I'm sorry, to Shield, to Pacific Care. We would exclude Blue Cross because of the IBW sponsored plans, and then the other 2 that we also included, which were Cigna and Aetna.
I think Health Plan of Nevada is too small,
No,
and they're too regional.
And actually, they're actually owned by, recently purchased by United Healthcare, so they are technically under also that umbrella.
Yeah, because the thing is, if you use those same carriers of Blue Shields, Pacific Care as a group and sent the RFP to Kaiser, we just might get Kaiser to give us a better deal.
Potentially.
That's what we do with RFPs, is potentially. Then we can make a decision on the reality.
Potentially. I think, though, the option, there wouldn't be a realistic option to move everybody to Kaiser, though.
No, but you got to get the bid first.
Sure.
To say if it's reasonable. If we don't have the bid, then we're just talking in the air. If we don't know what the dollars are, if you put out an RFP to Blue Shield, Pacific Care, and these other carriers, and Kaiser, and said, here's 9,000, 3,900 active and 3,900 retired. What deal can you give me? That's what the whole purpose of the competitive bid was. That Kaiser could come back instead of saying, yeah, here's 11% increase and an 8% increase. What would be the competitiveness of them all bidding for those 8,000 employees?
Sure, and I can't answer what that magnitude would have been, but there is some potential there.
Yeah.
And
They
let me just
may not have come up with 11%, knowing there was competition as opposed to a franchise.
Certainly. They may not have come up, maybe it would be 10%, maybe it would be 9%, I don't know. Kaiser operates, really, it operates in a different world. But let me just get back real quick to a couple of points where you did ask employees who have the option. George mentioned that everybody has, or I think most of the plans have the option for other carriers. Well, are they competitive? And so when an employee looks at what it's going to cost them, yeah, they are competitive. I think this year there's, I think, a couple of tiers that probably aren't as competitive as Kaiser, and a lot of that has to do with how the MOU establishes how the MOU establishes what the contributions are, because they are pegged to Kaiser, which gets back to the point of if you replace Kaiser, then you have to address that also in the MOUs and make some provision
I think
for
you're
it.
jumping ahead of us. If you don't ask them what their cost is, we can't even get to the discussion about replacing them. So if you don't even send it out to a bid and say, I got 4 companies bidding on 8,000 employees, what's the best deal? You can't even negotiate. What you do every year is take their 10% and go away.
Well, and let me just also, it's probably not in there, but I mean, it's not necessarily 10% every year. So for instance, I mean, that's going to fluctuate. And basically and it's all of them. It's not just Kaiser, but it's all of them. And they fluctuate.
It's actually 3 last year.
Yeah, it was 3% last year. So now we're talking about an average of 7 over 2 years. How they establish rates is really based off of how the department members utilize the plan. So they're looking specifically at claims. So they're not just going in and establishing rates as they would for, let's say, individual insurance.
But I know that. I just wanted my last comment. If you don't ever ask them and you don't let them compete, you'll never have the answer. And the issue is you can have all these rationale why Kaiser and what it costs. But if Kaiser knows I don't ever have a competition, I can just give you a bill every year and you're going to pay it. Because they don't have to worry about Blue Shield coming up with something better, more cost effective, less costly, because they're not even being asked.
Councilman? I just wanted to comment that what you described is actually the model that the Personnel Department uses for the council control departments. So it probably would be beneficial for the Department of Water and Power as well as Mercer to get a copy of the Personnel Department's last RFP because...
But you read the committee report.
Yes, sir, and I also met with Water and Power in July, and I think that meeting was productive, and I certainly got the impression that Water and Power understood the committee's instruction. In addition, the Personnel Department was included in that meeting as well. Where the gap occurred, I'm not really quite sure, but here we are. And Caroline did mention that there was a follow-up presentation to the committee in September about their intention to go to an RFP. I did follow up with the department in January of this year to ask them the status of the RFP. They informed me at that time that the RFP wasn't released until December.
But they didn't inform you it was only one segment.
Well, correct. And because of the fact that the Personnel Department was included in the meeting, and we talked about the Joint Labor Management Benefits Committee, that they should also benefit, from that discussion. Apparently, there was no follow-up with the Personnel Department to get a copy of the RFP that the Personnel Department released. But the Personnel Department, in fact, has been very successful using the model that you described, wherein the RFP is released to all of the potential healthcare providers, including Kaiser, with the understanding that the bid that they were supposed to provide to the city would assume that they are going to provide coverage to every single employee within a council control department. We have always had Kaiser. We have always had other options in addition to Kaiser. But using that model allows us to negotiate better pricing with Kaiser as a result.
And I think the benefit of their model was that we had them go out for an RFI first and had everybody give them all of the state-of-the-art available medical techniques and plans. And then when they made their RFP, they put all the RFI information so people could bid against it. And when they bid against it, you now can sit down with them and negotiate. So That's why we put that in the committee.
Just to clarify, June, so it's all inclusive in your RFP, and then you still end up with multiple contracts with more than one carrier from the one RFP?
Because including that information gives us leverage for negotiations with the various carriers. And I'm not a benefits expert, but certainly I would encourage, and I can certainly give you the name and phone number, of the individual.
No, we were attending the benefits committee meetings and monitoring some of that was going on with your plans.
Mr. Zine, you've been waiting patiently. Do you have some comments or questions?
Yes, the dental and health, 2011, 2012, 201 million, 3.9% increase overall.
Yes.
Okay. When it comes to, and the 8.4 million savings was obviously good. When it comes to the health plans and the dental plans, how many companies are out there? How many are available that serve this region?
Mercer, turn to Mercer
So
in
for
response to that.
for the medical that serve this region, that's
How many are there that we haven't touched?
for medical. The only one that wasn't touched, well, so Blue Cross was not touched because it's the provider for the IBW plan, so
Okay.
we didn't go to them. And the only other one that wasn't touched was HealthNet. And
There's not a lot of competition,
no, there isn't.
and that's the point, is that you only have a few apples to draw from.
From
It's not like
from
there's
these-
100 people out there, 100 different plans you can.
No, it's a little wider for the dental. There are more options for the dental, but for the medical, this is basically it.
'Cause I know we used to have Transamerica, Ross Release,
Prudential, Equitable, that's all gone.
so they all merged or went out of business. or
They've
something.
all were purchased by they've just eaten up, yeah.
So when it comes to an RFP, we put an RFP out, the limit, there's a limit of how many people are actually in that business now.
Right.
So I understand, knowing it for over 40 years, how I've seen them come and go. The subscriber, is it for the employee and a spouse or significant other?
There's various tiers. There's employee only, employee plus one, and employee plus two or more, which we call the family tier.
Okay, so family tier, and does the contribution from the employee escalate?
I explained that in our, we look at it first for the subsidy that DWP offers, which we tie to the Kaiser rate, and then that is applied, the employee can apply that to the other plans that they may enroll in. And where their premium amount exceeds the subsidy of the Kaiser rate, then the employee has to pay their contribution. And where that occurs for them right now is in the family tier of the Pacific Care HMO plan. The employee is required to contribute $85.40 a month. And on the Anthem Blue Cross plans, in the employee plus one tier and the family tier of their PPO for Anthem, it's $203.23 and $560.16 is the employee contribution if they opt for that plan in those tiers.
So there is that contribution. Have those gone up from the previous year with this increase? On what?
Definitely the Pacific Care family tier has gone up. I'd have to look and dive into the details there to comment about the Anthem Blue Cross. I believe it did, but I don't have that in front of me. I can find it if you want me to before the meeting's over.
Okay, and with I made some other notes on some of these issues. The retiree plan, what about the retirees that are at that age of Medicare? How does that work with this? The retirees on Medicare?
Okay,
Because at a certain age, they have to go on Medicare.
at age 65, they go on Medicare. So then when they're enrolling, they have more tiers than the active employee. The retiree has an employee only under age 65 is different rate than the employee only age 65 or older. There's an employee plus one dependent under age 65, employee only under 65, plus a dependent over 65. There's multiple tiers when you get to the retiree coverage. And then there's a flat subsidy for them also tied to the Kaiser rate, and they apply it based on their plan they choose and the tier they're in.
And have those ratios gone up, the employee contribution with the increase?
Actually, the contribution for retirees has gone down this year because of that savings of the consolidation, Blue Shield going into United Healthcare. United Healthcare was able to offer lower premiums, so the retirees have less contributions this year because of that savings. And maybe Rob can comment further.
And that dynamic is going to change whether it's active or retirees each year because the contributions are pegged to Kaiser. So to the extent, for instance, last year, Kaiser's increase was on the actives was 3%. So to the extent that the other carriers' rates are going up by 10% or something higher than 3%, then there is an increase in the employee's cost or the potential that they would hit that threshold versus if the Kaiser rate goes up by 20% and then everybody else goes up by 3%, then it's really unlikely. So that's going to change from year to year which way it goes.
And the coverage, we've got police and fire have a plan, similar, different providers, the water and power, the other employees. I know you talked about negotiations. Do you represent all of the different entities, Mercer?
So I work with the team that represents the DWP. We also have a separate Mercer team that works with LA City.
Okay, so the same representative company is out there trying to negotiate medical and dental coverage?
Yes.
Okay, and then there's a comparison that they provide dollar for dollar. In other words, this plan versus a plan for other city employees?
You mean a comparison of the benefits that are being offered and the designs being offered?
And what they're paying for?
There have been some, a lot of times we do try to keep things somewhat siloed without getting permission from either the city and the department to, share information. So we're not, we're observing, client confidentiality because we do see them as two separate entities that we deal with each as a client. So we're always looking for permission if we want to compare things, and sometimes we do get requests, and I think sometimes maybe they are generated from this committee with regard to whether it would be the 10-year look back and what was the city doing. So we do have those types of conversations as well.
And then Mr. Parks mentioned the number of water and power employees this covers. If you've got 9,000 or 10,000 versus 40,000, has there ever been discussion of, let's say we got 40,000 employees for medical and dental?
You're talking about, the overall city.
And for subsidy, and as well as, obviously, if you have a younger workforce, you're probably going to have the maternity service, whereas the older workforce, you don't have that. You have, whatever old
Durable
people have.
medical equipment.
What?
Durable medical equipment.
Yeah.
And
It's obviously, then the cost is obviously different when you've got that split between the age factors. And I don't know if that's probably representative of the entire city workforce.
Sure. I think what we're talking about is consolidating all of the plans, and certainly that does present
Or negotiations for the plans. Not necessarily, say I want Blue Cross or I want Kaiser, whether I'm with the city clerk's office or the police department, records identification or...
So again, we get back to the majority of the costs that are built into a premium surround claims.
Right. And there's an offset where you have younger folks versus your senior population.
Right. So it wouldn't, the claims portion, you could see some savings. It's probably possible to negotiate in terms of the administrative component. If we were to look at negotiating from a perspective of all three groups, the claims component
would be
that's
broken
not
down.
going to change.
Right.
It may change from one bucket to the other any given year because things will fluctuate at different rates. So what that does mean is overall there's more stability in the claim component of that cost. So that would occur.
Because I'm just looking at with this, and obviously we've got to have the medical plan. I don't know if there's time between now and July 1st to come up with any kind of different options versus what you've got on the table for us. But I'm looking further down the road to say with the fact that the economy doesn't seem to be improving. The fact is, you got a shrinking workforce, and you've got these responsibilities to provide medical and dental care. How, because Mercer's been doing this for a long time. I'm just looking at it, how do we manage it through the Personnel Committee to save some dollars and still provide good service?
Gosh, I guess I don't know who that, we'd have to look into who do we need to get permission from to actually have those conversations to operate in that matter, but we can certainly do that, and I would look for, assistance from.
Yeah, because we're not looking at individual people, we're talking about individual plans for municipal employees, whether it be the police, the fire, water and
But to
power.
negotiate them from a collective perspective, to say, right now, I'm not just talking about what I represent on the department, now I'm talking about what, and I would obviously be with other Mercer colleagues who represent the city, to say, collectively, here's the population that we're talking about, okay? And so when we're negotiating with you, we're talking about that bigger bucket rather than being siloed. So, and that I would think, I would look to the department or the personnel department of the city in terms of how to get the permission to accomplish
Yeah,
that.
I
But
think-
from our perspective, that would be fine.
Because I think Mr. Parks's comments regarding the RFP and this and that, if you're negotiating for 10,000 people versus negotiating for 38,000 people, but it just, we're duplicating that effort. You go in, then the next Mercer goes in,
Absolutely.
the next Mercer goes in with the same company. We're like tripling our efforts. What do you think, Madam City Attorney?
Yeah, just to address one issue that would have to be looked at, I think, from the city attorney's office perspective, is whether doing so would implicate Charter Section 682, which basically states that the Board of Water and Power Commissioners has the authority to designate the benefits of the employees of the Department of Water and Power. So obviously, we'd have to look at seeing whether a universal or
I'm just looking at pricing. I'm looking at consumer
no,
pricing.
I'm saying, but I mean, we'd have to make sure that we're not implicating anything in the charter provisions and doing.
I just think we might get a better deal for everybody across the board. Anyway, that's all I have.
So the question is, where do we go from here? If I had the ability to send back everything but item number 2, I would. I'm not sure whether even doing that and going to a month-to-month might not wind up too costly and too disruptive. So
I would support what we have on the table.
my suggestion would be to approve the reports that we received and what we have on the table, to direct the department to move forward with what we asked essentially a year ago and have re-asked in this meeting in terms of looking at further competitive bids. And I would ask the department come back to this committee on a quarterly basis to give us updates on your progress, so that there's no possibility of this slipping away again as it did the previous year.
Are you both with Mercer?
No, I'm with Mercer.
You're with?
I'm a department employee.
George is my assistant in employee health and benefits.
Okay.
So that would be my motion.
I second it.
Let me just ask one thing. As part of that quarterly report, and I know you can't give all the secrets in negotiation, but could we be kept abreast of whether you're having success at adding the language about a broader range of health providers?
To the extent that we can, do so, yes.
And I don't know if we would need to look at a separate motion, but I think in some way we should look at whether to suggest consolidating all our health plans across the city family for greater cost effectiveness and coherence. So
Because if you work for Water and Power, and I work for Department of Transportation, and we go to Kaiser, or we go to Pacific Care, city employees, there should be some kind of a coordination with it.
you would think it would be more cost effective to negotiate on behalf of everybody. So actually,
We wanna do a motion?
maybe you and I should just draft a motion.
We'll do a motion.
Bring it up. So
We'll do a motion on that.
we can do that independently.
Okay.
All right. Well,
That
That's
means-
everything except 7 and 8. I would say due to the lateness of the hour, it's an item, those two items, I think, merit a robust discussion that I don't think we're ready to have. So I would just ask that we continue those to the next meeting of this committee
Councilman?
and place them as the first items on that agenda.
I'm sorry, Councilman Koretz, but for clarification, prior to your motion, there was a discussion about costing the month-to-month option. Is that something the committee still wants as a separate report back? Okay.
I think we can ask for that information.
And that was for the dental. Is that correct?
Is that
On the
this-
dental.
The dental,
Correct.
but also, I thought you were gonna get the dental, the Kaiser.
Cost month to month for the
Let's limit that
United
just to the
Concordia and
dental.
Delta Dental.
Okay.
Thank you. So we are adjourned.